There's noise everywhere. Slack messages, WhatsApp chats, the countless headlines telling us that the world is coming to an end. So it's hard to know if you're doing life right. How do you know that you're working on things that truly matter and tending to your most important relationships? Meet the annual review. It's a set of 16 questions that will help you celebrate your wins, check that your spending and actions align with your values, and honestly assess where you're holding yourself back. So the first question we're going to start with is a fun one. And this involves going into your camera roll and picking the one picture that best captures your year. So I'll pull up the one for us. This is our family, and this was our first international trip. This trip's going to come up a lot in the annual review to Paris since COVID, our first international trip. Family, the four of us, and we were just being tourists. Even though I've been to France a bunch, so has Lisa, but our kids had never been there. And so we were being tourists. This is us on one of the Bolt bus tours. Big bus tours doesn't get more tourists than that. Seeing the scenes, it was raining. We were passing the Louis Vuitton store, the Eiffel Tower, obviously the Rodin Museum, many, many more, just taking selfies, being silly. It was drizzling and having a blast. And so that is the picture. So your first exercise is to find a picture that captures your year. This is a really fun one. All right. Question 2. What were your top personal and professional wins this year? All right. Top personal and professional wins this year. So I will start with the professional. And I've played a little bit small this year. I've really cut my work hours. My ambition has recalibrated at a lower level, so to speak. And we'll talk about that. But what I'm most proud of is on the coaching outcomes. And so, as you know, I do coaching both in groups, radreads.co/coaching, and one-on-one with folks who are post-achievement, high net worth, that are trying to really shift into a new season of life to fully capitalize and fully take advantage of the things that they've set up for themselves professionally, status-wise, and financially. And when I look back at these coaching outcomes, it's remarkable because it's almost close to 100%. And so these are people who have walked away from high paying but soul sucking jobs. They've actually done it. And they've done it in a way that doesn't terrify their families about money, that doesn't lead them to into a scarcity mindset that drops them into something totally unexpected, that brings them more joy and purpose and meaning into their everyday activities. Some have turned have leveled up their side projects. Some have traveled more. Some have really leaned into the role of being a parent during that magic window, those kind of first 10 years when your kids really need you. And some have taken sabbatical. So I'm really proud. We're talking probably like 25 people over the course of the year, both in one-on-one and group. And like I said, the hit rate, and some of them have closed the door and said, you know what, I'm committed to this path that I'm on, but they've set real parameters like for the next year, for the next 2 years until I turn 45, 50, what have you. So that's the professional win. The personal win, I would say, is this is the first year that I have learned how to feel. I know. And you've seen the podcast on IFS, on attachment work, on psychedelics. So to break it down, I'm a very heady person. So I think about, if you ask me, what am I feeling? I think about it. And I might say right now, I'm feeling very excited. But if you asked me what my body is feeling right now, I'd say, there's a little bit of tension in that I want to make sure I'm doing this right. I'm not super prepared for this. There's some kind of there's some kind of tingling in my arms right here. That is the enthusiasm of doing something that I love. But I would say that overall, there's a little bit more tightness than than lightness. And that's something that I want to always be aware of, right? That tightness is a sign. Like if you live with tightness for decades, you have high blood pressure, you have a heart attack. You might, but really paying attention to that, and that work on feeling that becomes much more. I've talked about it in the context of work, but when you're talking about relationships, particularly with your wife, my wife Lisa, my kids, my family, my friends, really like learning how to feel, because there's this whole new terrain of the human experience that comes from feeling, right? And maybe I ask you, it's not part of the review, but like, when was the last time you felt joy in your body? Not like, oh, I'm happy right now. I am joyous right now. All right. Proudest moment in staying true to your values. Question 3. What is the proudest moment staying true to your values?
Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless. If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now back to the video.
I'd say the most obvious one that comes to mind is that at the beginning of the year, I committed to volunteering every Friday for 40 minutes in my daughter's class doing a math program. 1 year. That's, I don't know what a school year is, 35 weeks, 37 weeks on a Friday, which is good because I don't usually have any meetings on Fridays. But it's a small, like I get to see, this is my youngest daughter, so she's in second grade. She's still so excited to see me when I come into class. I get to see her. I get to see her in her environment. I get to meet her friends. I get to do something that I actually enjoy, which is teaching kids math. The kids are funny. They tell jokes. They know me. And it's just, it's who I want to be, right? I have said, one of my values is being a good father, being a good husband. And I'm excited that I really, like at a visceral level, every week is like this commitment shows me that my activities are in alignment with my values. Other proudest moments staying true to my values is I quietly mentor a handful of folks that are very much not the avatar of the people that I coach. And I don't want to say too much more here, but it's a decent amount of time. It's not structured, but that's something that is aligned with my values. I'd say this podcast, creative. We're on the 80th episode. 80, can you believe that? But the way it aligns with the values is that it's not like knocking the lights out, metrics wise. It's not driving a ton of business. But I always have stated, I want this to be fun. I want it to be kind of low frills in the sense that, I still do the cold opening. There's no fancy editing, and I want to look forward to it. And so I do 80 weeks of doing something when you still look forward to it. The guests have been amazing. I will say that some of these solo episodes I'm kind of like running out of stuff to talk about. So there's a little bit of tension there. So I maybe find a way to pivot that format. And then the last one I'd say is the memoir that I'm writing. And, I'm about 20,000 words deep. And what I'm proud of is that, again, I'm leading with my creative process and not the business side of it. We're going to talk about the business side in a further question. But, 20,000 words is no small feat. That's probably, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 pages, maybe 30, 40 pages of a book. And feeling, I can't wait for you guys to read that. All right. What small actions, question 4, what small actions have brought you a disproportionate amount of joy this year? Flat out has been going to concerts. We have gone, Lisa and I, it's our thing. It's hard to go to concerts in LA, but we have seen mostly a bunch of electronic music, but we saw Justice twice, Jamie XX. There's actually a Daft Punk movie that's playing for one day this Friday, Interstellar, which remasters the Discovery album. We saw Tool. We saw Arcade Fire, or Lisa saw Arcade Fire. We saw Usher. So I think I saw Gesaffelstein. I don't even know how to pronounce it, by myself. I've been to a few concerts by myself. So just rediscovering that, the joy of music. And so going to concerts, this ties into my new hobby, which I'll talk about later. And then rediscovering music. So those have been some small actions. I think I barely listen to podcasts anymore, swapping it all for music. In fact, I have like this funky bass lines playlist with War and Prince and Parliament and James Brown. It's just been fun to rediscover old music. Question 5, what skills are you developing that excite you? Writing the book, long form writing. So I have written, for about 400 straight weeks, 500 to 1,000 words in a weekly essay. I actually stopped that, which was a no. We'll talk about that later. That feels really good, in favor of writing about 2 hours a day towards the book, which is a very different skill of this kind of long form writing, connecting longer ideas over a longer period of time. It doesn't have that like punchy conversational blogging style, like to the point that a lot of blogging now is kind of one sentence paragraphs, which is kind of a strange way to write, but that's because everyone reads on mobile. So going back to, how do people read a book has been a skill that I'm quite excited about. Second skill, short form video, TikTok. This started as a whim probably 18 months ago, and I'm doing a TikTok a day. Again, basically swapping out Twitter, which it doesn't light me up anymore, to just put random thoughts, random ideas, little tips, little musings, philosophical musings, if you want to say. And I do believe short form video. I do like in consuming short form video, mostly for entertainment. So music stuff, sports things, pop culture, memes, things like that. But it's not going away. And it is the way to connect with new audiences, sadly, whether you like it or not. And, using short words. And that's because AI is going to really crush a lot of the word-based things. Again, in that kind of grabby style of Twitter and LinkedIn. And then lastly, storytelling and public speaking. So storytelling has been a big skill here, but I'm really, in 2025, I'm doing a lot more public speaking. A lot of them are unpaid gigs where I really want to learn how to practice that skill set. I could see public speaking becoming a bigger part of my business toolkit, for lack of a better word. And so I'm taking the stand-up comedian approach of just raising my hand, saying yes to gigs. It's easier to travel now that my kids are older, and really trying to refine that skill of speaking live in front of an audience. Number 7. So we're going to switch to the next section, which is challenges and growth. Number 7. What's a yes you wish was a no? Now, I won't get into too much details here, but there was a consulting opportunity that I chased as a result of prestige. It actually doesn't pay much, but it was prestige based. It involves, my old life. And the more I think about that, it's not really aligned. I chased it for the wrong reasons. I don't really enjoy the work, and it takes up a decent amount of time. Number 8, what's a decision you keep postponing, and what's blocking you? I think it's one of the most powerful questions. So here I'll talk about going after a traditional book deal, publishing deal. Now, without boring you with the details, my sense is traditional publishing is a little bit like going to an Ivy League school. I've said this before, where there's a path. You kind of have to fit yourself a little bit into that path. You have to make a very clear commercial case for your book. And it's not always the best financial outcome. But it's very high status, right? You become a traditional published author, and look, it's something that is important to me. At the same time, I want to enjoy the process. I want to have creative control. I want to just do things that light me up. And right now, writing just lights me up. And when I've gone down the path of traditional publishing, they're like, well, are you like the career change guy? Are you the productivity guy? Are you the money guy? You know, it's a little bit like a VC where they have an idea of where you fit, as they should. It's a business. And so I've kind of stayed away from that road. And I'm pretty sure I'm doing it from a creative integrity perspective. But I'd be lying if I say there isn't a fear of rejection there as well. And so I'm trying to figure out what's that right balance between the creative integrity and the fear of putting yourself out there, which I usually don't have. But again, in these kind of more prestige channels, prestige environments, I do have it, you know, because I do like things that are prestigious. I'm not going to lie about that. The next thing that I keep postponing is I think that there's a calling to do what I do that's not content in a way that is non-financial. And I'm not sure if that involves children, kids, or underserved groups. And again, it doesn't have to be someone who's struggling and, you know, someone in poverty. But I believe that there's a way to do what I do with the enthusiasm when I do this kind of mix of coaching and teaching for groups of people where the financial remuneration is off the table. And I don't know what that is. And why do I keep putting that off? Probably a little bit of scarcity, and that's like I still do need to make money. But I'm getting to that point where it's like the marginal utility of another dollar is quite low for me, particularly with the way risk assets have been performing. Now, that's not a guarantee, but I don't, there's nothing really I want to buy. And I don't want to buy back free time because I have a ton of free time. So what's the point of money? And I don't want to leave my kids an inheritance. So what's the point of more money in that case? And so the next thing I keep postponing is I think that I'm ready to do events. And I think that the first event would probably be kind of a men's group organized around like a physical activity, probably surfing, but that would be selfish, but it could be in the mountains or something. And I tried to do more of a conference, and we couldn't do it. We couldn't pull it off. We totally misjudged the demand. We lost some money in the process doing it. So I think that there's a small group where I could see us going to the mountains or to the ocean, and there's the element of group coaching. There's the element of reflection. There's some kind of side networking that's happening. And it's anchored around, you know, being in nature, having good food, meditating, walking, hiking, running, so on, being in nature. So what's holding me back from that? Honestly, I don't think I'm thinking big enough. And I think, you know, again, you got to put some money on the table. I think honestly, though, it's probably like there's like just a bigger fear of rejection. That like you put an idea out and it like people aren't interested. So more to come there. And lastly, what's something that you keep postponing? More YouTube, more like structured videos. I do think that, you know, I used to be Twitter, newsletter, blog, and I now I think the new world is short for TikTok, YouTube, podcasting, and then some writing. But just the thing is, it's really hard for people to read your writing these days, and people just they have less appetite for it. Now, not everyone, but so what's holding me back? I think there's a lot of parts of that whole pipeline that just don't feel fun, and I'm trying to figure out what like ultimately for me, it's about the human connection, the dissemination of ideas, the community building in the more abstract sense. How do I get that right? And I do think with something like YouTube, it would be much more like this. These are the 4 steps that I took to leave Wall Street, which again are topics I want to talk about, but when you make them so packaged in such a YouTube-y way, I got to get turned off. But I think that there's something to do there. And again, I think it's the same approach that I take. It's like lightweight experiments. Try to improve one thing, try to improve another thing. All right. I believe we're on question 8. What was the biggest challenge to your identity? Ooh, this is a juicy one. And really has to do with money. And it has to do with the realization that I shared earlier is that, the next making more money it doesn't matter at this point. Again, our investment portfolio has done really well. I see no signs of that abating. I also don't think it's going to continue to do what it's done in the past 2 decades. But there also, RadReads didn't. I think RadReads will probably come out with like 200,000 profit this year, which is lower than the last 2 years. The last 2 years were 250K. Which is still slightly below our annual spending. So, there's a little bit of a cash outlay to fund that difference. But I think that losing the identity is like Khe is someone who knows how to make money, knows how to make a lot of money well, is a tough pill to swallow, because in some ways, like, making money is always good. It's always nice to make more money. There's definitely more of a dopamine feeling than I need this feeling, but that's where the identity part comes in. And I do struggle with, I'm still a competitive person. There's this tension here between being a competitive person, and that's really manifests in business, and a creative person, where it really manifests in art and like being proud of the things that you created. And I know you're going to say, well, you can overlap the two. It's like the reality is you can and you can, because, and I think I've done the best I can in overlapping the two, but that's why I just haven't made much money on the business side of things. And so I think that I do think that I need to shed that identity of like, Khe is someone who knows how to fucking make money, because I do know how to, but I'm also choosing not to because I see the opportunity costs and the trade-offs. Number 9, what deserves more of your time but gets neglected? That flexibility immediately comes to mind, and I could just feel the cricketiness. Is that even a word? Just tightness overall in my body. I just don't feel as good, and so that is something that I would love to address, but just I have not made it a priority. The crazy thing is I can't use the excuse that I don't have time to do it. I just haven't. I've chosen to not make it a priority, and I think that this is one of these things, like kind of compound interest. You want to get ahead of it, Like I have a lot of 45-year-old friends that they're just in a lot of physical pain, and it's not going to get better. It might stay the same, but it's not getting better. And so again, something to stay ahead of. Probably something, now that I think about it, if I could do 5 minutes a day for a couple months, and then up that to 7 minutes a day for a couple months, and then maybe work your way up to 10 minutes, I think would be totally fine. I probably would benefit from having a teacher. So I usually do things like I'll hire someone for a couple months. They'll help me get everything sorted, and then go off and do it on my own. That's where my superpower of habits kicks in. All right, next section: relationships and boundaries. Number 9. What family moment will you remember for the rest of your life? Again, I would say that trip with Paris. Our girls were old enough to have opinions on things, but young enough to be cute, and just like we could still use executive authority in all the decision making. But yeah, that sense of adventure, and we were just roaming around the streets of Paris at like 11, because we were still in LA time, at midnight, and taking them to bars and not bars, mostly restaurants, a few bars, and just jiving as a family. We're trying to recreate that trip this year, and I'm right here. I'm noticing the attachment. It's like, oh, I want it to be like the other trip, but I think we have settled on one international trip a year, and so that's going to be Japan, and it will be spring break, and so that will be Japan. The other thing that I'm most proud of is a family moment I remember is, this was a year of grief for us with the loss of our beloved Lisa's dad, the beloved Paul Manley. And I think the thing that I'm we're quite proud of is that we did not hide our grief from our kids. Our kids were part of the grieving process. And so they saw us cry. We cried together. They cried. We didn't sugarcoat how we were feeling, what we were feeling. We took them to all the events. We talk about it. We introduced them to our spiritual way of thinking about the afterlife. And I think that that's not something that neither of us grew up with. And that's something that I think that's probably the proudest family milestone. All right. Next question. What's an important relationship that you haven't been tending to enough? I've thought about this a lot, and I have some answers. I'm going to put an NA on this one. This is the next question. I've lost count. If you were to send 3 handwritten letters to someone who have meaningfully impacted your life, who would they be? I love this question because it can be over the past year, but it could just be over your life more broadly. And so I think for me this year, more, I would say that there are the 2 folks that I worked with on that point of how do I feel. That was my IFS therapist, internal family systems therapist, and someone that helped me work through some of my attachment wounding. And so those would be the 2. I'm trying to think professionally. I've had a few folks mostly who have given me permission. And so they both move around a lot, but they're Paul Millard and Johnny Miller. And they've really given me permission to kind of be myself. Lawrence Yo as well from moretothat.com. And I think the common theme there is, find like people who give you permission to do things that might be not conventionally line up. And then Keller Medlin, my music teacher, and learning music. This has been learning how to make music. So I started with hip hop, but I've actually landed more towards house music, has been probably the highlight of my year, non-family. And I love it. It's so hard. It's one of those things that makes you see the world differently. It's so satisfying. There's no goal. I don't have any goal other than to just improve each time. And actually not even. The goal is to have fun. And Keller has been an amazing, amazing teacher. This is a fun one. So I encourage you to do this one. Next section, money and resources. Next question. What's the most meaningful way you spent money? Again, I'm going to talk about the money that we invested in therapy. I think there are these different therapy and coaching. I think we ran the math and it was probably like 15,000 between the 2 of us for the year, maybe 20. Best money we've ever spent. We've seen that in our own relationship where a lot of our patterning that I've talked about in different episodes around, me shutting down. I basically stopped drinking because just like I've been overcome by a lot more peace and coming towards each other, in our marriage in a time of grief, being vulnerable, surrendering into love. These are all things that have resulted from that amount, that large spending in therapy. That Paris trip. We also flew premium economy, which for international, I think the flights were, 7,000 or something, that's a lot. And someone for me who I have a block with paying for travel, I still think of things like a flight shouldn't be more than $600. Most things I'm pretty loose on spending, but something about flying. And so when you fly international and you upgrade, you're in the $6,000-7,000 range. And that I'm glad we did it. And Lisa really pushed me on that. She enjoys flying nicely, much more than I do. And then she points out, she's like, you like it more than you want to admit, which I know she doesn't listen to the podcast, but it is true. And then I would say there's a lot of like non-decisions that we've made. So we haven't upgraded a lot of our stuff, TVs, furniture. That's the benefit of renting. Our car, we live in a town where everyone gets a new car every 3 years. Our car is still 6 years old, but it had its first set of problems ever. But I just feel really lucky that we've made a lot of non-decisions to upgrade, and it ties back to our primary money value, which is simplicity. And the simplicity in our lives. We walk our kids to school. It's a 1-minute walk. We have the same car. We rent our house. It's been 7 years. We just don't have a lot of complexity in our everyday life. And I think that's, as I get older, I think that's the most beautiful thing. I think it brings so much joy and so much peace. Next question. Did you notice areas where scarcity thinking held you back? So flying, and I'm trying to let go of that. That's actually where I use Adam Katz has this kind of 3-digit rule. And so he basically says, take your net worth. So let's say your net worth is $5 million. You cross out the rightmost 3 digits. So you cross out the last 3 zeros. And then you're left with 5,000, which basically, and then he says, if you need to spend anything that's under 5,000, don't think twice about it. And so it's basically 10 basis points, 0.1%. And I think that works if you lean frugal, which I think many of the people watching this episode do, lean frugal versus being big spenders, buying watches and shit like that. So that has helped a lot. So there's probably a few things. I keep talking about getting an electric bike. They're, $2,000, I think, for a nice one, $3,000. I probably should get one. I think, again, it's the simplicity. I just don't want more stuff, more things to charge, more things that can break. But, we have one car, so an electric bike would be nice. I talked about the vacations, kind of letting go on like a budget. Again, we don't travel that much. And then this is a fun one, but PRP for hair loss. I think it's about $1,500 for 3 sessions. And again, I think maybe it's more just confronting the fact that I'm paying money to try to address. I think it also, PRP has like a low hit rate. And so, it's just like, God, am I just wasting money? And for those of you who don't know, I think they take your blood, they take out some platelets, I think. I might be getting the term wrong. And then they like shoot them into your head, and supposedly your hair grows back a little bit. We'll see if that works. But that is, there's a little bit of scarcity there. It's not all financial. I think, anytime we talk about my hair loss, it's, there's a lot of factors at play there. And then lastly, what's something you bought that you regret? Again, we don't spend that much. I would say that there have been a few times when we've kind of said like, oh, we need to go relax, and we go book a spa trip. Those tend to be disappointing. They almost feel like you're trying to buy some kind of immediate gratification. It's usually pretty expensive. And it always disappoints, especially because, Lisa and I are pretty peculiar about the types of massages that we like. And so I think usually like spending on a spa day, I think also spending more on like nicer dinners has kind of lost its appeal to us. We like good food, but we've definitely, I think we're realizing that we're definitely food snobs, but we're not high-end foodies that want to spend, $500 on a dinner. This is without alcohol, or limited alcohol. So I would say that when we've tried to spend money on spas and food, like outlier money, it usually disappoints. So that wraps our annual review. I hope you take the time to go through these questions, write them down, talk about your answers with your spouse, reflect upon them, and that should provide some amazing momentum for the new year. Take care.